much. I've got a funny feeling I'm not going to get that kind of applause. I don't know what gives me that idea. And neither am I going to be able to sort out my microphone. Hang on a second.
Same as the government.
As long as you can hear, I think you can all hear me anyway, can't you? I think you're all in the right places. I'd like to start off just by debunking a couple of myths, because I can understand why there's anger, I really can. And I know there's hurt, I really do. And I'm not here to give you platitudes, and I'm not here to say the cuts don't hurt or the cuts don't matter. What I am here to say is it's important that we get our facts straight. Now, why is it important we get our facts straight? Because if we are going to sort out the mess the country is in, and whatever you think of the cuts, you've got to appreciate the financial mess the country is in. If we're going to do that, we can't just let emotion rule the day. We've got to look at the facts. And I'm going to start with a couple. Firstly, the banks. Was the international financial system any good? Was it sensible? Of course it wasn't. I don't think anyone on the planet exists that says the banks and the banking system has done itself proud. That's nuts to pretend so. Has the coalition, have the Conservatives just said, oh, carry on bankers? No, they have not. We are the only party to have introduced a bank levy. We are the only party to have demanded that the bank bonuses at the publicly owned banks have been cut. The Labour Party didn't do that. We've done that. Second thing, the rich. Now, as an MP, I'm earning more than I've ever earned in my life, and that's wonderful. I worked for 4 hard years to get this job, and I won't pretend that it's not fantastic to have some financial security. But there are public sector workers who earn 4 times the amount of me, and guess what? Many, many, many times the amount that the lowest paid public sector workers get paid. You have leaders of councils who get paid £500,000 for managing one of the smallest councils in the country, where the people they're presiding over, the social workers, the people on the front line, get paid a fraction of that. I don't like that, and the Conservative Party is looking at changing it. But before we attack the rich, something to remember. Over half the taxes in this country, over half the money that we can spend on things that matter, the most vulnerable, people with mental health issues, pupil premium for our poorest kids, over half that money comes from the top 10% earners. So if you clobber them with more taxes, guess what they'll say? They'll say, see you later. Yeah, they do have enough. Well, that's fine, but guess who's going to have to foot the bill when half the taxes that we receive into this country disappear? The money just disappears. Who do you think is going to have to foot the bill? Yeah, it's you guys. It's me. So that money will have to come from somewhere. So saying let's whack the rich, yeah, it sounds really nice. We can all cheer about it. It sounds incredibly good. The reality, it's actually quite different. And the thing is, when you actually deal with finances, when you actually deal with a country, you can't deal with the world in a place you'd like it to be. You've got to deal with it as it actually is. I'm afraid, get real. Sometimes it's very hard, but if you're going to protect the most vulnerable, and you're going to live in a country where we protect the most vulnerable, you have got to get real. And what makes me angry is not only that we are having to make cuts, but we are having to make these cuts. And I congratulate the Anti-Cuts Alliance on putting on what is proving to be a very informed and interesting and sensible debate. That's a great thing. But I might suggest that if you were to make the debate have even more credibility, you might have invited along as well someone representing the people who got us into this mess. The people who took the biggest tax income in history in 1997, the biggest income into the government, and that's money you can spend on all the things that we want to spend money on, helping the poorest, helping the most vulnerable, and turn that into the biggest structural deficit in the developed world. 13 years. Now, I know there are a lot of good intentions along the way, but this illustrates my point. Good intentions are just not enough. If your good intentions result in a country that's so bankrupt, we're having to make the cuts we're making, I don't think you've done a very good job. So, who was it who saw public sector fat cats reaping in £500,000 salaries? It was the Labour Party. Who changed the rules in the city, which meant that banks no longer no longer had a requirement to borrow against their assets and let them go for a borrowing free-for-all? The Labour Party. And who was it who sold off our gold, raised our pensions, and let tax evasion cost 15 billion in total and benefit fraud over 100 billion a year? It was the Labour Party. And the gentleman might be asking what we're going to do about tax evasion, and I've got 10 minutes and I'll take questions afterwards. We have invested at a time of difficulty because we realise how important tax evasion is. We've invested 900 million in sorting out tax evasion, so people can't just shift all their assets overseas. We've done that as a government. So I understand your concern about tax evasion, just as I understand people's concern about benefit fraud. What are we doing? We're doing something about it. And I know people are shaking their heads. And I know the remedies might not be very nice. I know they are incredibly difficult. Goodness me, I have people come into my surgery and they do give me a hard time, and quite rightly so, because I'm an MP in the government, telling me how the cuts are affecting their life. And I'm really sorry. I am really, really, really sorry. And that is why I'm so angry. But you know what will happen if we just bury our head in the sands and say like Ed Balls, oh, there's no structural deficit, it'll all be fine. Do you know what will happen? It won't be the rich that really suffer. It won't be the rich that everyone hates who really suffers. No, they'll probably be all right. It will be the poorest. It will be the people the pensioners, people with mental illness. It will be the poorest. And do you know who will suffer most? It's our children and our grandchildren. Because if we're worried about pensions now, if we don't sort out the country's finances, you're going to have to look your children and your grandchildren in the eye and explain to them why they live in a country where they have to work till 80 or don't have a pension at all, and in a country where we can't even afford public services. It's not a nice choice to make, but if we're going to protect our future, we've got to get real now. Thank you very much.